Welcome to IFA. I fix everything.
Today's project is to enhance my home studio. I will add 5.1 surround sound and conceal the wires in the wall. As I began to temporarily install the speakers in their preferred location, I had to disconnect the right-hand surround because the speaker wire would not reach the audio-video cabinet placed on the left-hand side. Even though it's temporary, I couldn't handle having loose wires hanging down the walls and a speaker that would not play. To route and conceal the wires, I first needed to remove the baseboard. To begin molding removal, I insert a wide blade putty knife as deeply as possible to prevent damage to the drywall. The goal is not to pry the molding free, but to open a gap large enough to find the nearest finish nail. Once I get a small gap opened up, I insert a plastic carpet tuck tool. It's essentially a plastic wedge with a handle that allows easy installation and removal. It has plenty of leverage to pry the molding free from the wall. As you pull the handle toward you, the load is distributed evenly across the width of the blade against the molding and against the drywall at the lower edge. If you need even more leverage, form a gap with the trim tool and use it as a backer as you pry the molding free. The carpet tack strip is blocking the removal of the molding, so I levered the molding up with an automotive trim tool as I pulled it free from the wall. It took about 3/4 the length of the molding to reach a breakaway point where the nails no longer had the strength to hold the molding down into position, and I was able to pull it free. Be sure to check the wall for protruding nails that have pulled free from the molding. I used the plastic carpet tuck tool as a backer as I pulled the nails from the wall. I'm removing the molding from the face wall using the same methods shown earlier. I began opening the gap with a wide putty knife, inserted the carpet tuck tool to pry the molding free, and lifted the molding up using the automotive trim tool to clear the tack strip. I'm ready to begin fishing the speaker wires through the walls. I remove the speaker from the mount to allow more clearance to drill the hole for the speaker wire. I used a tape measure and a pilot drill to mark the location of the first speaker wire hole. I used a small drill bit to check for obstructions such as a 2x4 wall stud. If I needed to change the location, I'd only have a small hole to fill. The drill bit I'm using creates a snug fit on the speaker wire. Next, I drilled the hole at a downward angle. This allows the wire to be drawn from the bottom without binding at the hole. I tied a mason's line around the shoulder of an apex bit and passed it through the hole. Using a hole saw, I cut a plug of drywall that will be concealed behind the molding. I lowered the apex bit down with the string and fished it out the base with a magnet. Next, I cut off the string and taped it to the wires and began to fish the wires through the wall. As I fed the wire in from the top, I maintained tension on the drawstring and the wire fed out effortlessly. I decided to forego the pilot bit, and as luck would have it, I drilled straight into a stud and had to drill a second hole. To mark my exit hole, I tied an awl to my string line and used it as a plumb bob. I marked the hole and punched it out with a drill. When I removed the plug, I found they added a patch block to the sill seam. I was still able to pass the speaker wires through the restricted opening. I measured the height of the electrical outlets before I cut the opening for the low voltage boxes. I cut a round hole because my original plan was to pass the speaker wires through a brush cover. With the left-hand side complete, I moved on to the right-hand rear surround. And I went back to drilling a pilot hole prior to the main hole. Even an empty string was enough to align the output hole. I attached the string to the speaker mount bracket using a slip knot to prevent it from being prematurely drawn through the wall. I was easily able to retrieve the weighted string from the hollow wall. Because the walls didn't contain insulation, a slip knot was all that was needed to pass the wires through the wall. The holes for the speaker wires were drilled on the inboard side of the mounts. This will allow the speakers to block the view of the wires run to the wall. The apex served two purposes and weighted the string and allowed easy retrieval with a flexible magnet. I released the slip knot from the speaker bracket, attached it to the speaker wire, and pulled it through the wall. I'm using an automatic wire stripper to remove the insulation from the speaker wires. If you're unfamiliar with automatic wire strippers, they have a stop guide and a set of clamping jaws that hold the wire as the cutting teeth cut and extract the sheathing. The striped wire is considered positive and should be connected to the same terminal on all speakers to maintain speaker phase. I connected the striped wire to the red terminal on all the speakers. These are inexpensive rocketfish mounts sold by Best Buy. The speakers are held in place with an Allen screw. To ensure proper alignment, I placed a laser on the center letter of the model name. Then I drilled a pilot hole to make alignment of the hole saw foolproof, even though it's obstructed by the television. For the receptacle hole, I used the laser and a tape measure to ensure proper alignment. A plumb line also works quite well. That's how I drilled the bottom hole. The low voltage recessed cable plate is actually a one-piece cable guide box. To install the low voltage cable plate, the drywall is cut out similar to a low voltage outlet box. The low voltage cable plate guides the wires like a plumbing elbow. The upper guides the wires into the wall and down to the lower plate. I tied off the center channel speaker wire to prevent it from falling into the wall. The other two wires are plugged into the television. I found a wide blade putty knife makes a great marking tool for cutting the outlet boxes. With an oscillating saw, I quickly converted the round hole into a rectangular pocket. I test fit the cable plate, then I removed it and reached into the wall and retrieved the power cord and the HDMI cable from the television. I installed the lower faceplate with the channel facing up so the wires would flow smoothly. As you rotate the screws to the right, the locking wings fold out into position and then begin to tighten. Do not over-tighten the screws. The wings are fragile and a new cable plate is over $10. I set up a horizontal laser to install the center channel speaker shelf. I verified it with a level. I realized I could have used a pencil, but I didn't want the marks on the wall. Using the floating shelf bracket as a template, I placed it against the laser and drilled the pilot holes. Using a soft touch on the impact gun, I installed the wall anchors. The floating shelf bracket is held in place with 4 wood screws. With the shelf in place, it's time to strip back the wires and install the center channel. Next, I'm going to cut the passage for the center channel and the monitor wiring. I notched the lower edge of the drywall to transition the speaker wires from the channel along the floor to the hole and up into the wall. From there, they pass through the low voltage box and the brush cover. I'm using an oscillating saw, but a razor knife could also be used. The speaker wires are laid in the channel formed by the gap between the carpet and the wall. When the molding is installed, they'll be held in place and blocked from view. The next step is to strip the insulation from the wires. I attach 2 alligator clips to an old headphone jack and play a tone through the MacBook and listen for which speaker is playing. Then I label the speaker wire and move on to the next one. It takes just minutes to determine the 5 speakers. It also helps determine if the speakers are playing properly or if there's a bad connection. While I was going through my stash of old RCA cables, I found a monster subwoofer cable that had severe rodent damage. I began to inspect the cables. There are actually 2 monster subwoofer cables. I began by sealing any sheathing damage with a glue gun. Then I cut away a section of the cable with concentrated damage. I don't have any high-quality RCA jacks I could use to rebuild the splices, so I'm going to remove the jack from the shortest length and repair the longer segment. To begin with, I unscrewed the solder cover and slid it down the cable so I could begin disassembly. I spread open the wire crimp with a carpenter's awl. I was surprised how soft the metal was and easy it was to work with. I began by desoldering the center post. It was much easier to access. When the center post was desoldered and moved out of the way, I had access to desolder the ground terminal. This is a coaxial cable. It has two center conductors, a shield, and a sheath. Instead of using an ordinary wire stripper, I decided to use a coaxial antenna wire stripper as an experiment. This is an inexpensive Klein Tools dual cartridge stripper. You simply slide the wire in until it stops and you rotate it and the razor cuts the sheath. This tool was designed to strip coaxial antenna cable, but I found it very easy to use. Use light pressure to prevent cutting into the main conductors. With the outer sheath removed, I peeled away the aluminum foil shielding and separated the two primary conductors. To make the job easier, I pre-tinned the ground wire with solder, then rested it on the connector and soldered it in place. After soldering the center pin, I checked it carefully for a solder bridge. When I was satisfied with the solder joint, I crimped the connector with channel lock pliers. Here's a close-up of the completed solder joint. The last step was to ohms check the wire for an open or a short between the conductors. The result is 0.47 ohms. I upgraded my design from wires protruding through a brush plate to a modular wall plate with detachable patch cords. This will give a more streamlined professional appearance and allow easier upgrades in the future. The junction box plate holds 6 modular terminals. I needed to add another junction box and wall plate. I have 11 terminals. Each speaker has 2 banana plugs and an RCA jack for the subwoofer. I marked out the second junction box and pre-drilled the 4 corners to prevent overcuts. The hole provides a plunge point for the oscillating saw. The junction connectors snap fit into the modular plate. This plate is outfitted with 2 banana jack sets and an RCA jack. The left panel is the rear surround and the subwoofer. The right panel is the front and center channels. The last step was to remove the wires from the channel and vacuum it completely with a crevice tool so the wires rest smooth in the channel. With all the speaker wires routed, it's time to reinstall the wall trim. I'm removing the nails from the back side using a large pair of end nippers. This prevents blowout at the nail holes, and it's especially helpful if the nail holes have been puttied. I attached a large magnet to the leg of the pliers. This collects the nails as I go. I'm reattaching the molding with color-coded trim screws and hiding the heads in the grooved molding. This will allow fast, easy removal in the future. Thanks for watching. I hope you learned something along the way. If you did, please like and share. And remember, subscribers are always welcome.